Hey guys, I wanted to share with you something that I have been going through for the past several years, and something that really didn't become clear to me until only a couple of months ago. And while I feel like we are talking about menopause and perimenopause on social media and in the press more and more, I still think that it is something that individuals are having a hard time accepting or having a hard time recognizing. And of course, it's going to present itself very differently to every single person out there. And even though I have been very open to reading about perimenopause, reading about menopause, doing research, talking to my friends about it, I still didn't even really recognize all of the signs. And I do want to preface this conversation, of course, by saying I'm not a doctor. I'm just, going to share what I went through in my experience, and hope that if you're someone around my age, even if you're a lot younger, if you have a woman in your life that's important to you, that you'll listen to my story and maybe take away something that could be very helpful. So I'm 51. I turned 51 last September. And I want to say over the past 5 years, I started to experience some perimenopausal symptoms. And I was on birth control. So for me, it wasn't like a very obvious shift in my menstrual cycle, which I think is probably the most overt or obvious sign that someone sees that things are changing. Our cycles get shorter, or they get longer, or the bleeding is heavier, et cetera, et cetera. Basically, it becomes irregular. I didn't really have that because I wasn't getting a period because I was on the pill. So what I started to notice were just some minor physical symptoms. And so at that point, my doctor put me on a different pill, I think one with more hormones. And so I thought, okay, I should be good. And that would set me straight for a little while. And then it happened again. I started to notice some more physical symptoms. Anyway, at that point, we had the conversation. I was like, well, I'm on birth control, so does it even matter, HRT? In my mind, I just didn't even think that there was a difference. But there is a very big difference between being on birth control and HRT. And that was definitely a learning point for me, because I think when we talk about HRT, people just talk about them in terms of hormones, but they talk about birth control in the same way. And so, I just sort of assumed that it was kind of like the same idea. But they're not. They are very, very different. And obviously they're dispensed differently, and the dosages are very different. And so at that point, my doctor and I had the conversation about do you want to move on to HRT? And I thought, no, I'm okay. I don't think I need to. And so my doctor was like, well, you just let me know. And I see her every year, and she's like, let me know if before our next annual, if you want to talk about it, come in or whatever. She was great. She was very open to discussing it and, educating me more and this and that. Again, it wasn't that I wasn't open to it, but I thought I just had it under control. I was like, oh, it's fine. It's fine. It's just, whatever. It's fine. It's natural. Whatever it is I'm going through is natural. And then I remember, not this past year when I saw her, but the year before, I told her that my sleep was becoming pretty consistently irregular. And this was all kind of around the time that I was starting, working out with my trainer and this and that. And anyway, I was kind of going through some changes physically. And so I wasn't exactly sure, what I could blame for all of these changes. And so I wasn't sleeping well. I wasn't sleeping through the night. I was waking up in the middle of the night. And I've talked about it a little bit here. I was waking up in the middle of the night, and not even because of night sweats, but just waking up. And it wouldn't even be like before when I was younger, just rolling over, some noise waking me up and just kind of being groggy. I would wake up ding, it was 8 a.m. in the morning. I would be wide awake and not even close to being able to fall back asleep. And I remember thinking, thank God I work for myself, because I could just get up and stay up, and then this always happened, at around 5 or 6, I would get sleepy, and I would go back to sleep and basically nap until about 8 a.m. And I thought, oh my God, I can't even imagine women going through this who have an office job, who wake up at 3 a.m., but let's say have to like leave their house and be ready for work at 7 a.m. Oh my God, what a complete nightmare. What a total nightmare. So anyway, this interrupted sleep kept going. I never had a problem falling asleep. So it's not like I had insomnia. So again, it was like that, I don't know, maybe I'm not eating well. Like maybe I'm working out too much. Like I was making up all these excuses. And then I started to read that interrupted sleep is very, very common for women going through perimenopause. And so I thought, okay, well that's gotta be it, because I've never been a poor sleeper. I've always been able to fall asleep and stay asleep all night very heavily. And so I was like, okay, and again, it was like I was educating myself with all of this, but it was like I had to do a specific search relating to this particular thing, because I think the information out there is still about all the things that we have heard our entire lives. Hot flashes, wrinkly skin, dryness down there, all of these things, and things that I personally did not actually experience to the extent that I think a lot of women do. Like I got hot like every once in a while, but I wasn't getting like hot flashes often. I was getting them, I mean, I could probably count on one hand, but I would get them. So anyway, my point is, I was experiencing these symptoms, which at the time I don't think were being talked about a lot. And it was like I had to do a specific search, like, is interrupted sleep part of perimenopause? Is it a symptom of perimenopause? And then I would get like a yes, it happens, with the hormonal levels and cortisol and whatever, blah, blah, blah. I was like, oh, okay. So this is most definitely happening. And again, having another conversation with my doctor, and she said, yes. And she's like, and she even said, she was like, if it gets unmanageable, let me know. I said, okay. But me being the stubborn mule that I am, I thought I can manage this. This is fine. Again, I work for myself, whatever. So I wake up in the middle of the night, I get up, I read, I would actually cook. I would be very productive in those hours. And then I would fall back asleep at like 5 o'clock and wake up between like 7 and 8 o'clock, basically. But it really started to wear on me, and I was really starting to feel kind of sleep deprived. I was starting to nap during the day, midday, very consistently. And I got to the point where I was napping very consistently twice a day. Late afternoon, I'd wake up and have lunch, and then I would go back to sleep. So I would be taking 2 naps, one before lunch, one after lunch. I was having interrupted sleep. So I was basically like napping all the time. And so my mood started becoming affected. My motivation was becoming affected. My work ethic at that point was becoming affected. And I just didn't feel like doing anything. I really got to the point where I was just beside myself. And I thought, okay, I really, really need some help. So this was right before Thanksgiving. And I even thought to myself, oh, maybe I should wait until after Thanksgiving, wait until after Mishmas to make this change, to contact my doctor and make this change. But at that point, I really couldn't take the interrupted sleep anymore. So called my doctor and I said, I think it's time. I think I'm ready to switch from the pill to HRT. What do you think? This is what I'm experiencing. It's happening more and more, blah, blah, blah. And since we had this conversation already, it was kind of easy to pick up and just kind of give her an update on everything. And so she called me right back and basically put me on HRT. So I thought, all right, here we go, because I had been talking to some of my girlfriends, and the majority of, in fact, all of them, got onto HRT, and the dosage wasn't right, and they had to tweak this and tweak that. Basically, you're taking estrogen and progesterone. And so I was prepared for this kind of roller coaster, and I thought, if I have to go through this during Thanksgiving, which I had a lot of family over, and I have to go through this during Mishmas, so be it. I'm just gonna have to deal with it. The change was immediate, and it was overnight. So I was supposed to finish up my pill and then just start taking the HRT. So I only had like one more day left on my pill or something. The timing was actually very fortuitous. I put on my patch that morning and I took the progesterone pill at night. The next morning, I was like a different person. I slept through the night, which had only happened maybe a handful of times, the entire year before. And I felt like a completely different person. And it was only then that I realized how depressed I was. And I want to use that word very carefully because I have never suffered from depression. I've never suffered from a mental illness. So when I say that, it is just from my perspective, and I'm going to try and explain how I felt as clearly as possible. But I don't want to diminish anyone that has, suffered from lifelong depression or whatever. I don't mean to do that. I don't mean to use that term lightly. But looking back, I really feel like I was depressed, and it was a very, very slow decline into depression. It was probably over like 4 or 5 years. And I think that's why I just didn't even recognize it, because it was so subtle. The changes were so subtle and so slow. And it was, even up until I took the HRT, I was blaming the fact that I wasn't sleeping, which I'm sure contributed to this kind of depressive state that I was in. But I woke up the next day after my very first day of taking HRT, and it was like my life went from black and white to color. I felt like I had turned into like a two-dimensional version of myself, and I woke up and I was like a three-dimensional person again. And I could not believe the difference that I felt. First of all, I couldn't believe how quickly it happened. I was like, oh my God, we are just a bundle of hormones, aren't we? But I couldn't believe, and not that I'm, beating myself up over it, because, hey, you only go through perimenopause once in your life. But I couldn't believe that I let it go for so long. But looking back, I realized that, I was feeling symptoms before like COVID, and that this decline into my depressive state was really, really long. And so I just couldn't recognize any of the signs. I couldn't recognize how different I had become over the last 4 or 5 years, basically what perimenopause had changed in me. And, I look back and I think, oh, I wish I started HRT sooner, but I mean, who knows? I think the dosage that she put me on was perfect. I mean, I got so lucky. And if I had gone off of the pill and started HRT sooner, that dosage probably would have been right. Anyway, the timing for me was perfect. The dosage is perfect. I have been feeling like a completely different person. And I remember when I started doing Mishmiss, I thought, oh my God, I would not have been able to get through those 25 days of videos if I wasn't on HRT. I think this would have been the first year that I probably would have had to skip a few days here and there, because I was absolutely exhausted, and the exhaustion and the hormonal dips and all of that, I just had the hardest time getting out of bed and being motivated. The only thing that was keeping me going was like going to the gym and having that routine, but it was such a struggle. Every single morning I had to give myself a pep talk, every single morning. And again, I'm just not like that. I'm a pretty self-motivated person. I wake up in a great mood generally. I wake up in a great mood, and then maybe the mood diminishes a little bit during the day, but I usually wake up really, really happy, optimistic, excited to see what the day has for me, ready to like tackle whatever work I have to do. And I felt like all of that had been beaten out of me right before I started taking HRT. I really cannot believe how much that affected me. Now, I can't say that I'm like the same Michelle that I was when I was like 35 years old. I am 51 years old. That's never gonna happen. But there is your core self that I feel like I lost during that time. And I just hope for any of you out there experiencing changes that are more than just hot flashes, more than just, saggy cheeks or like, a double chin or whatever, more than just weight gain in your middle. But if you really feel like you're losing yourself, definitely look into HRT, especially if you're around 45, obviously 45 to 50 or whatever. I think is 50 like kind of like the average year when women go into menopause. Again, I'm not a doctor, but I encourage you to at least start the conversation if you haven't already. I know that we're talking about this a lot more, which I am so thankful for. I remember I mentioned it to my mom and I asked her, I was like, did you have symptoms? She was like, I don't know. She's like, I can't remember because we never talked about it. We never addressed it. We never even allowed ourselves, whatever. She's like, I remember getting like hot every once in a while, but that's it. And I thought, wow, well, I'm so glad times have changed in that regard, for sure. But not only talking to my doctor, so I definitely recommend that. Definitely start the conversation, ask them about what you should maybe be looking out for or whatever, but talk to your friends. I can't tell you how helpful it has been to talk to my girlfriends, Lara. So I've been talking to Laura and that whole group of friends. I've been talking to, my friends here in Las Vegas. We're all around the same age. And it has been not only informationally helpful, but the support has been just incredible. Like I remember when I started going onto HRT, I had at least 4 women in my life check up on me, either text me or Marco Polo me and ask me like, how's it going? How are you feeling? I mean, that is incredible. I love my husband. He's incredibly supportive, but he's a man. He has absolutely no idea. And he sits there and he listens to me. He hears what I'm telling him about how I'm feeling or whatever. He has no idea. He cannot relate, not one bit. So not only talking to my doctor, but talking to my girlfriends, all the women in my life, has really been so helpful. So I encourage you to talk to your doctor. I encourage you to talk to your friends. I really encourage you guys to research it. It really is not something to be taken lightly. And I think because we all go through this, I, in a way, kind of diminished it in my mind. In a really sort of subconscious way, I didn't even, not that I didn't want to address it, and not that I was in denial in any way, but I really didn't think it was going to affect me to my core. And it affected me to my core, way beyond hot flashes and wrinkles, way beyond that. It really affected me to my core. And now that I'm on the HRT and I'm, I can look back and see what a huge difference it's made. My God, I was depressed. I feel like I was a very different person. And I alluded to this in my, I think day 25, my last Mishmas video last year, how you guys, unbeknownst to you, you helped me so greatly in terms of motivation and getting out of bed in the morning. The thought that I wouldn't be getting content up for you guys was unacceptable. And I didn't want to come on camera and just be like, I don't feel great today, like every day. That's boring. No one wants to see that. So little did you know, you guys were so meaningful in my life the past several years. And I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for being there. I want to thank you for being a very big reason for keeping my life on track, for getting me out of bed in the morning. I appreciate you so much more than you will ever know.